We talked a great deal about the tax credits that have lured all these projects here to Georgia, and I'm wondering what the next step should be, not only from a tax policies perspective, but maybe investing in a different sort of education infrastructure to sort of create this pipeline of folks who are able to continue growing your industries. Can you talk a little bit about what you feel like the next step should be now that Georgia has sort of established itself as the star that wandered from Hollywood down south? What happens next to continue shoring up and additionally growing your industries?
For us, and where'd Janet go? Janet came up to me at the beginning and was talking about a meeting we're about to have about. We use a software called Toon Boom, and it's a animation software, and we were able to take advantage of some WIA funding through the ARC here in Atlanta, the Atlanta Regional Commission, training dollars to train unemployed or underemployed Georgians to work on the software. So, we had some old dog animators that were not used to it or had never tried it, and we had some younger guys that went to school for something else and were out of work, and we were able to get a lot of people through on those training dollars, and it obviously helped and affected our budgets even, in addition to the film tax credits. And anyway, we're talking about how we get more Toon Boom training into schools, even at the high school level. And, kids are, and it's a big issue, kids are coming out of college these days with this giant debt, and we kind of feel like a lot of the kids could be learning these trades in a shorter amount of time. They could be learning it at the high school level, and it may not need to invest as much as they have in a higher education if they're going to be artists. Not that we want the colleges to be mad at us, we don't. But it just would provide a different avenue for some of the kids coming out to be able to go right to work. And if they're talented, for us in animation and design, it really, that degree isn't necessarily as important to us as their skill set and their skill level. And if we can start that in the high school level in Georgia, that would be amazing for us.
I mean, particularly in post-production, you can imagine that with all of this work coming to Georgia, there are just a large boatload of folks coming from other states who have the skills, as well as those who are already here to work on the production side. Hair, makeup, camera. We see the influx of those people. But certainly, in order to get that work done, you're in post-production almost from the very beginning of shooting the film these days. And it is a highly sort of technical and specialized field that we find a lot of people in school are not necessarily focused on. So we do have a gap trying to find really good talent to fill the jobs that are there. And so we do a lot of that training ourselves, and ultimately, if we did have a resource, high school would be a great place. But even with the colleges, we've partnered with SCAD and with UGA, with some of the professors who are interested in finding out what do our students need to come out of school prepared to do, so that I know that I'm sending people out into the workforce that can get a readily available job. So that absolutely is sort of one of the biggest hurdles that we're currently facing, and without being able to address it, it's hard to know that the pipeline can continue to grow and be fun.
I know the Georgia music folks have gone down to the legislature during the session, and they'll take Zach Brown down there, they'll take Matt Powell, and be like, "Hey, Governor, we'd like some tax credits." I'm wondering, what, if you feel like moving forward.
We'd like some
I'm
tax
sure you,
credits,
yeah.
I mean, right now, post-production certainly does qualify if the film is being shot here, but now that you've got a state like New York that has built a really attractive credit system where you do not actually have to do the production in the state of New York in order to leverage the post-production tax credit, and the tax credit if you're shooting outside of the city of New York and in upstate is even greater, that it just makes it that much more competitive, I think, for Georgia as an industry to make sure that we're continuing to be competitive and attract. We have to stay on top of being, careful about not offering something that obviously is going to be economically hurt the state, but also is going to continue to be competitive with what other people are now reacting to in LA, in New York, to what we've done.
It's just a really good point because all of our creators, I mean, 15,000 are globally creating content, and we actually, as a company, help do post-production to like wrap it up into really nice mashups and shows. And we can't get that credit then to do it here in Georgia, so that work is going to New York and LA because it makes more sense.
Right. I would say in many ways sort of idea of tying things to the shoot is a bit of an outdated theory, and that if they're here spending money producing content, whether they're shooting it in Georgia or it's completely being created in the computer, shouldn't really make a difference. And in terms of that, it actually is something that actually will create more permanent jobs and help get us to sort of a critical mass, so that educational institutions feel like there are enough jobs out there doing these particular things. Because that's the deal. It's like if we talk to a professor at University of Georgia, he says, well, how many kids each graduating class can you take? So if they're going to educate them for us, they need to know that there's actually a significant enough amount of jobs to be taken. And Georgia, while it's doing incredibly well and attracting people to shoot here, it needs to be a truly vibrant force on post-production. It needs to be doing post-production not just for films that are shot in Georgia, but be a place that films wherever they're shot, or films that are not created by shooting but by some other digital means can be done through post-production.
I think, unfortunately, just like Joel mentioned earlier, for the longest time, we were educating these kids at SCAD and UGA and different places. I went to UGA, and they'd come up, and you would be told all the way through, as soon as you can, get to New York or LA, and that's when your real career will start. And the tide has turned, and I think, and if we're able to get those post-production credits in place, which I think we all are on the same page, and hopefully it'll happen sometime soon, we'll be able to hold that talent here, because otherwise, like you're saying, we're bringing them up right and sending them off somewhere else, and that's not going to help us at all.
I think that is true. I mean, one of the best ad schools in the world is here in Atlanta, and generally speaking, the people who are graduating from that school don't think for a second to stay in Atlanta. But that's an interesting intersection between what's going on in the sort of filmed entertainment model is now starting to open people's eyes that Atlanta actually is a place that creative content is being created, and it sort of will create this cycle where now, wait a minute, they shot Anchorman in Atlanta, they shot all the Hunger Games movies in Atlanta. Maybe Atlanta is a place that I can actually create creative content, and gives Atlanta some juice in that way, and it becomes a place that people really want to stay and be involved in that community. So that's a really important part of how feature film entertainment, television entertainment, advertising, they're all sort of knitted together in a way that has never existed before. What screen you view it on doesn't really matter anymore.
Did y'all see that clip of Kevin Spacey talking at the film festival? I want to say it was in Scotland. And the tenet of his talk was about how the audience really has to be in the driver's seat. And as you were mentioning, what screen you see something on is irrelevant in some cases to some folks. And he talked a lot about, realigning the business model to, conform with people's ever-changing schedules, ever-changing appetites, how they want to view things. Releasing an entire pilot season so people can just like spend a weekend binge watching that sort of thing. Talk a little bit about how, sort of anticipating and reacting to and being proactive about people's, changing appetites, viewing patterns, and consumption patterns. What kind of impact does that have on your creative process?
Well, actually, there was an interesting, case study. AT&T partnered with Twitter. I don't know if you guys have heard of the show At Summer Break, but it's similar to like the OC from MTV, where it was reality, followed around a bunch of rich kids out in California, showed their life. What was really cool about it was it was a completely different spin on the creative process and how this show was going to take form. So the whole point was it's a digital-only play, and it was actually going to play out in 2 3-minute snippets on Twitter. And each one of the personalities in it was going to basically have their own storyline and their own videos delivered via their Twitter accounts. So they started with Twitter. They had a Tumblr page that aggregated it, and then actually you could see all of the episodes on YouTube. It was a really good partnership with like the traditional production groups because it was the Chernin group that produced it. AT&T helped to fund a lot of the paid media and the audience development, and then Twitter helped with like the platform aspect, and we actually helped with video distribution. So bringing in these YouTubers into the storylines. So when they had a party, we had a musician from YouTube attend the party, get a little bit of film coverage in there, and then they actually helped drive audience. So it was really cool from a creative aspect because the story was literally in real time, and as you guys know, reality shows aren't really real, they're scripted. But from a viewership standpoint, they have like 80,000 subscribers. The show only went over a 2-month time frame. And I wish I had some of the other stats with me, but I mean, it's done phenomenally well for being a digital first and being produced in a way that is so untraditional in what you would expect for a TV show.
Yeah, I think the biggest, thing that we are challenged with is that we still sort of have what's going on today. And in a room like this, you probably have a lot of early adopters of things. So we're always sort of out ahead of the curve, riding that first wave in. So the challenge for us is always we have folks that are perfectly content and might have an HD TV now, may not, don't watch things on laptops and whatnot. So we're really, kind of have to keep them in mind, but constantly looking at where are the other opportunities, and they might enjoy that show in the traditional sense, but what other ways do we find to deliver that content? And I think that consistently will always be for a while our challenge. So it's definitely that concept of what are other ways we can do it? And I think one of the successful things are certainly mobile. The NCAA, our partnership with NCAA and CBS this past year for March Madness, huge. I mean, doubled what they did the year previously, broke whatever records for mobile viewing, and doing a lot of things specific around such a high interest event that really you could only get in sort of a traditional sense, but really leveraging that popularity to say, hey, here's all these other ways we can give it to you. And I think the more we see the success of that, the more it allows us to, we're going to keep doing the traditional way, but we're certainly going to explore all of what mobile has to offer, or all of what another platform to delivery. But sometimes it takes sort of that keystone or that foundational event or whatever to really sort of fuel the idea that, hey, yes, this will work on these other platforms, but we have to have the sort of the resources to start it in the first place. And I think that consistently, economically, will be the challenge.
I think for us, one of the biggest challenges with that exciting new idea of sort of this on-demand viewing is the speed at which that demand is coming, especially in our business of animation and design. People want it faster. They want it a lot faster. And there used to be a traditional pilot season, and then this long would be the season of a series. And we would have time to animate it and time to get it done, but that has just changed. And as Kevin Spacey pointed out, someone might want to sit down and watch the whole thing in a weekend. And we don't have the time, the weeks between the airings of the episodes to get them done anymore. It has to be done much faster and in advance of the release of the first episode. And then there are things like promotions and that everybody wants to be tied in some way, very personally. And we did a promotion for Verizon recently. It was a Mother's Day promotion. The idea was they wanted it to be animated, design based. They wanted people to send in pictures of their moms. They wanted people to Twitter in song lyrics of a Mother's Day song, but it had to be timely and right on top of Mother's Day. So they're sending in their pictures and sending in their lyrics, and we have to animate this 3-minute, 2-minute, 3-minute piece using all of the bombs, all of the lyrics, in a weekend. And those things are really much harder for us than the old model of planning way ahead and have plenty of time to get things done.
My name is Anthony Showell. I go to John Marshall Law School in Atlanta here. My question is more of a legal question. With a lot of the changes that are happening in the television and film medium, and a great point with pointing out how fast the content needs to get out there, I wanted to know what are some of the more pervasive or more widespread legal issues that are coming up that may need to be addressed in the future for us young lawyers that are coming up.
There's so many. We need a whole different panel for that. You want to
Ownership. I mean, it's ownership and where it can be displayed. I mean, you have to start writing in provisions of, if something new comes up in the next 6 months, we still get to maintain our IP over it. I mean, at least from my perspective, we see it as an ownership thing and across all these different platforms.
The contracts get funnier and funnier because they're not only providing for technology that exists now, but they're sort of, and if something else happens that's cool in the next decade, it covers that too. We don't know what it's going to be, but it's covered.
And it's funny how, and related to kind of ownership and whatnot, we are having to explain to folks that, music licensing is pretty well known. Font licensing is something that we have to do now. So there's a whole technology and legal work to be done, and the rules for what we do on broadcast and print are different from what you do on web. Web, you wanted to use a particular typeface, there's different costs, and it's based on page views. So there's a whole different crazy model for that. So all the legal wranglings around, and again, you buy software and it comes with typefaces. Well, are we allowed to then use those? So we have all kinds of questions with our legal team right now, and it's not just United States, it's international. And so we've had legal issues of, who licensed the font and how it was used and whatnot. So you think of something so insignificant that and I guarantee you all have fonts that you downloaded, have no idea where they came from, and it's great. Personally, it's great for us, and anything we do, something that simple is a whole, and we've got literally a few lawyers working on that. So there's a lot of nooks and crannies there to worry about.
It's also just the tiers of where we are digitally now. I mean, we were just negotiating talent and music agreements, and it's sort of like, well, it's online, but is it online on your personal company, on your company website? Are you selling it as an ad space somewhere? Are you selling it to someone who's going to put their ad on it? And there's just tier after tier, and it's not very clearly defined. It's not very clearly defined, and so everybody kind of works together to sort of figure out a number to put against those talent and music agreements until sort of more definition comes into place. But as long as it takes the attorneys and the unions to figure out what that box is, the box shape changes. And so then they have to go back to the drawing board and think about it again from a different angle.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is D'Angelo Harris. I'm an IT recruiter / account manager working for Modus Adecco. That's my shameless plug, by the way. My question, I guess, is more geared towards you, Rhiannon, for Fullscreen. Since content creators are the lifeblood of your organization, what is some of the criteria you look for before you choose to work with that content creator? And how do you retain that talent since there are other networks out there?
It's a couple things. I wouldn't say it's like if you do this, this, and this, you become part of our network. It's more, because we actually have a staff of 30 people that look at the internet all day long and try and find new people to bring into the network. But it's really, one, looking at the level of talent and content that they're producing. So it may not be high quality, but the actual content itself, or whatever it is that they're trying to portray, is intelligent and it has legs. We'll bring them in. I mean, they could have no subscribers and it's still good content. And then the other level we look at is safety with brands. So because we do work with brands very closely, we want to make sure we have a good mixture of content that brands would want to partner with, because everybody who is on YouTube within our network, their goal is to make money. They make money off of advertising. You have to have content that obviously advertisers want to be around. And your second question was? Sorry.
No worries. How do you retain that talent?
The way we retain it is actually through technology. So we offer back-end services for all of our creators to make a community with each other. So we verticalize the creators through like a comedy vertical, a vlogging vertical, music vertical, and then we offer a social community aspect internally so they all can start collaborating with each other. They can learn best practices from each other. So even the big YouTubers who have millions of subscribers can now talk to smaller YouTubers and find ways of making even better content. So that's a big reason that they want to stay with our network.
Hey, how are you guys? My name's Christoph. I'm also a filmmaker, and I'm interested in a lot of things. In terms of measuring engaging good content, do you guys have any metric on how you guys measure content, or is it more so measuring the popularity of how many hits and numbers you get?
Well, I can tell you at the AJC, we are like obsessed with metrics, and I have site catalysts running all the time, and I can see what's resonating with my audience constantly, like minute by minute. It's almost kind of creepy, really. And when you see, and that's why I keep asking about audience-driven content and that sort of thing, is because we very much are aligning our content in the entertainment realm. We're not deciding what politicians to investigate based on their Twitter metrics, but daily we get sort of a broad look at what did well online and what time people were reading it. I can tell you that we've gotten much earlier about posting things. People want to wake up, check their Twitter feed, look at the website, and then go to work or get on with their day. And so we're up and cranking from about 6 to 9 a.m. is our peak time. And we can see what's resonating with people, whether it's news content, whether it's breaking news, whether it's in my realm, what movies are the most popular. It's kind of funny to see which movies sort of generate the most chatter while they're being filmed versus how well they do at the box office. Sometimes there's no correlation at all. And I can tell you that it very much informs coverage patterns, because there's one in me and there's like a million content providers out there providing stuff. And so, I mean, I go on Twitter all the time, and I tell people, y'all are my boss. I work for you. And, when people want to know what's going on, what's filming, who did I just spot, I know I've got to be immediately reactive to that. And so, for sure, metrics very much influence what we do.
So it's not related to my business per se, but Netflix, I don't know if you guys know, but Netflix, when their original content, decided what kind of content to create based upon the information that they received that their streaming customers were watching. And they also did some research into movies and content that were being pirated. And those were the movies that they wanted to make sure were available in streaming. And I think that it was sort of Steve Jobs' feeling in music, which I think is borne out, is that people will pirate things for sure, but the easiest way to circumvent piracy is to make the access easy and affordable for people. And if you do that in a presentable way, then people will come to it. And I think Netflix is a prime example of that. And they're basically looking to what their audience is, what they're interested in, what they're consuming. And there's a whole new industry related to figuring that out, for sure.
I wanted to ask a question based on something that I saw on Twitter the other day. This seems like such a great intersection of sort of legacy filmmaking practices and brand new technology. The Farrelly brothers are in town making their Dumb and Dumber 2 sequel. They start filming on Monday, I think, but they're already in town. And something really clever that I saw them do is they have a Twitter handle, of course, and they said, we're having a contest. Who wants to have a walk-on role in Dumb and Dumber 2? Send us your Vine, and we'll pick the best one. And so you've got 6 seconds to make your case to Peter and Bobby Farrelly, which is, of course, a lot of pressure. But, I mean, think about the streamlining of that process. I mean, back in the day when they were making Dumb and Dumber 2, or Dumb and Dumber 1, I mean, to get a role in that movie, you would have had to, like, have an agent and go to Hollywood and audition and, have some, work experience. And so, potentially somebody with an iPhone and 6 seconds of spare time could, make their big film debut. So I'm wondering, what sort of examples are you all seeing of, kind of a neat cross-section between, legacy best practices and also, new expedient technology?
This is unrelated to my company, but has anybody watched that game show, Million Second, what is that? Million Seconds or something, Million Second Quiz. I mean, it's totally that. To get on the game show, you can spend your evening playing the game on your iPad, and the next morning they show up at your house and say, hey, you're gonna be on the game tonight. So, I mean, it's crazy because I don't even know how you got on game shows before. I think you had to read your newspaper and see that they were auditioning in your city, and then you try out. But that's completely the way that they're doing this game show.
For us, it's related to the content production, in that we're now used to be that we dealt with film materials all the time, and now we deal with professional cinema cameras that are digitally, digital cinema cameras. But we also deal with, suddenly they say, you know what, we shot a scene with an iPhone today, or we shot it with this camera or that camera, and so we never really know what we're going to deal with day to day. And so at the beginning, we sort of have this whole process of, what are you going to shoot with? Really, honestly, are you going to shoot with this camera? Are you going to shoot with that camera? And they generally don't tell you everything that they're going to end up shooting with. So we just have to be prepared. We just have to be prepared to deal with whatever they're going to do. And that's enabled a whole new style of filmmaking, essentially, where they're getting shots that they just really could never get.
And from a sales perspective, it's almost made it easier. Technology has made it easier for us to plug into the community here locally. And sometimes we're informing our sales force back in LA or New York about things that are happening here, and hoping that they can help us jump on them and chase the business. Whereas before, we would really be solely dependent on them to be connected to the producers and the directors in the studios and to tell us what was coming into town.
Trying to think of a way we fit in. We're just so slow with animation. I guess the closest I can come is that the old practice is slow. It takes a long time to get things done. And we recently, I guess we've been doing it for about a year, but ESPN.com wanted to kind of have this partnership with one of our series where we would do it's called Carl's Lock of the Week, and one of our characters predicts the outcome of the NFL game on the weekend. So we get the information on a Wednesday, and we have to have it completely finished and up online on a Friday. And it's very, very quick for our typical turnaround time for 2 minutes, 3 minutes of animation. So we've kind of had to work out some ways to creatively get the animation produced and on the web every single Friday. And so that's kind of our quickest turn thing that we're doing right now. And technology's obviously made that possible for us.
I think what we see, and this is again sort of more purely technology, is that a lot of the best innovations and a lot of what we do in post-production were really driven by technically consumer or at best prosumer software. Final Cut would be the example most folks would know, and I think as much as there's a lot of debate, and we again could have a whole panel on what Final Cut 10, when Apple released that, did. It also points out that they are in some ways driving some things, particularly around metadata, that while we aren't going to use that software currently, we keep our eye on it because there are definitely things in the way they're doing things that look ahead. They didn't get it all right, but there are definitely things they're doing for something that's it's $300. There's a lot of speculation they might be included in the new Mac Pros. They may include all the Pro apps. There's speculation about that. But I think we now battle with companies who make software. They don't make broadcast or film production software. It's Adobe, it's Apple. Those are the companies now that we really deal with, and they really technically were at, in some level, prosumer at best. So I think that's probably, what's most interesting is that we really have started out where they kind of made a lot of things, that were difficult easier. And now we're sort of pushing some legacy things back on them for how we have to do things. But it's an interesting thing that we have to look at now, is that it's sort of, in cameras, is what made me think of it, is that, Canon did a camera that was just to take little videos for the web, and there are whole commercials being shot with a Canon 5D, and that's still happening. Canon now makes cameras specifically just, hey, if you really want to shoot a commercial or a film, we'll make cameras for you. But that whole drive of, hey, if this is good enough technology, we're going to use it to do things that are, traditional films.
Yeah, I would say it has nothing to do with Georgia, but there's a movie called, which may never come out, called Escape from Tomorrow. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but it was shot at Disney World. And these guys created this movie, and they did a massive amount of pre-production and planning, and they went to Disney World multiple times and filmed a fiction movie at Disney World, totally on the down low, with no permission, and it's a horror film. And it's in black and white. They shot it with prosumer cameras in order to evade Disney's security. They communicated with each other through text messages. So they gave direction via text message. So they didn't attract attention by huddling together to talk about things. And they made this movie. It was a huge hit at Sundance this past year. Maybe half the audience were Disney attorneys trying to figure out how to shut it down. But it may never come out. But you can look on YouTube. The trailer's up, and there's some information about it. It's a fascinating window into what is sort of enabled when the barrier of entry to filmmaking was so high because of traditional filmmaking technology was so expensive that now you can make content that looks good for much less, and it's accessible to people.